Three weirdest things you have seen people collect.
Weirdest. Oh, dead animals. When we collect, we have double fun because we have the experience of collecting, but we also have an object to show for it, not just a memory or a picture. Every collection has a story.
Is getting tattoos the same as collecting?
Really good question. Yes, I would think that tattoos involve both experiences and collecting because you can always show your tattoo.
What do you think about digital collectibles?
It could be a fool's errand. People who are collecting NFTs are doing so because of the novelty, which stimulates a certain area in our brain and makes us happy. Artificial intelligence, they say it acts like the human brain. We know a little bit about the human brain, but there's 90% plus that we don't know.
Comic books, coins, Pokemon cards, NFTs are a few of the things which people collect. They're spending thousands of dollars on buying these things. But why? To answer this question, we have Dr. Shirley Mueller, who is the author of the book Inside of the Head of a Collector. Dr. Mueller herself is a collector. She collects Chinese export porcelain. This episode is a lot of fun, so let's get right into it. Welcome, Dr. Shirley Mueller. Would you like to give a small introduction about yourself?
Of course. I wrote a book called Inside the Head of the Collector, Neuropsychological Forces at Play. And this is why I did it, Dee. The most recent literature on why collectors collect had been Freud and then a man called Münsterberger. Freud believed that you had to be depraved or deprived in childhood in order to be a collector. In other words, he saw it as a negative activity trying to escape demons, which is so interesting because Freud himself collected African art, Chinese art, and some other art. So he overlooked that and obviously felt that he was in the category of having to escape his own demons. Münsterberger, who was almost a century later, 1994, published his book having to do with collectors, and he went the same route as Freud. This is probably because he was a psychoanalyst, just as Freud had been. All of this was before the late 90s, early 2000s, when new technology was discovered, such as something called functional magnetic resonance imaging, known as fMRI, which essentially can monitor the brain as we are going through cognitive functions, also called thinking. And when that happens, this machine with very sophisticated equipment, computer equipment, can interpret where there's activity in the brain. So that when that happens, for example, if I see a piece of chocolate cake and I know I like it, you can see my pleasure center lighting up. I think that might happen to a lot of people who like chocolate cake, actually, which is most people. At any rate, what I wanted to do with my book, published in 2019, is to set right what had been published in the past based upon information at that time, but not modern information. So Freud and Münsterberger were essentially using their intuitive skills to try and figure out why people collected, but they didn't have scientific tools to help them as we do today. So I'm just using modern science in a new book to explain why collectors collect. And so we can understand ourselves.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So basically saying that like people who collect aren't weirdos or they don't have anything wrong with them. This is the conclusion I think we can take. I'm just going to keep it a little bit casual. So where was this interest coming from, right? Like, why did you want to learn about collecting and humans' behavior around it? Are you a collector as well? Is that where it origins?
Very good question. Yes, I am a collector. And before I started writing about why people collect, I was an even more avid collector. I just couldn't stay away from it. So, for example, there were certain things that I didn't just want, I had to have them. It was, some people would call it being a bit on the driven side. But on the other hand, if we think about it, collectors who want to fill in what they see as holes in their collection are no different really than people who gather experiences. For example, they want to go to so many baseball games, or they have a bucket list for vacations. That's experiences, but also it is just filling holes. 1,000 places you need to visit before you die, or I think a little more manageable might be 100 places you have to visit before you die, but it's the same thing, essentially. From my point of view, when we collect, we have double fun because we have experiences, the experience of collecting, because every collection has a story, every piece has a story. But we also have an object to show for it, not just a memory or a picture. So I think that collecting objects is the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's
and
very... I'm so
30
sorry.
to 40% of the population are involved in collecting, of the US population. And that's a huge number. Among kids, it's supposed to be even greater, like up to 70%. And then there's a drop off among the children as they get older. The beautiful thing for children is that collecting is something they can do in their spare time if they're lonely, don't have friends to play with. I guess I could say a little bit outcast in a way, but they can collect rocks, little things they find in their gardens. It's amazing that children are drawn to collecting to fill their time. And it's so productive because they can learn about different kinds of rocks, different kinds of mosses, different kinds of insects, whatnot.
Awesome.
I read this, I just want to just mention, I read this case history of a young boy, and it was so sweet. He was maybe 9 years old, and he said he collected because his parents were away a lot and he needed to do something that he liked. And so he collected, I can't remember whether it was rocks or something else, but I thought that was just so imaginative on his part and so productive and so positive, filling his time, not moping around, but collecting, actually devoting himself to it.
Mm. Yeah, that is quite interesting. I think I'll give you some examples from my childhood, from what I've seen, right? Like this is after getting into NFTs is what I realized, specifically in India, we as human beings have always been collectors. In my class in school, people used to collect peacock feathers. There were girls who would put peacock feathers in their books, and people used to collect stamps and coins. And I used to collect Pokemon cards and cricket cards and even Tazos. I'm not sure if that's a thing in the US, but they came with Cheetos and whatnot, right? Like, so people used to buy and collect Pokemon Tazos and different Tazos. So I've seen it growing up, but as we grow up, like you said, there is a huge drop off. So I think I've seen that happening, and it was just wonderful to see that we as kids, we are so curious, and no one asks us hey, why are you collecting postcard, or why are you collecting these peacock feathers, or we used to have scrapbooks, which I think is a form of ticking off and experiences, collecting each other's timeline, hey, this was the year. So I find that very interesting. So I want to ask you, where does this need emerge from? And is this a new phenomena, or us as humans have been doing it for a long period of time? Any early historical references do you know of us collecting?
People have been doing it for essentially hundreds of thousands of years. Arrowheads, for example, that does not go back 100,000 years. But there is mention of people collecting, even I think in the Roman era and Greek era. It's been forever. There's a need for people to possess. And when we possess, we control. And a collection is something that, other than our normal workday, we can't really control much generally, unless we're the boss. And even then it can be frustrating. But with collecting, we can gather, we can organize it the way we want to. We can invite our friends to enjoy it with us. We can meet new people who also collect the same thing. And we simply get benefits from it. We can, at the end, later in life, we can leave it to children, to museums, to relatives, whatever. And what has given us so much pleasure can continue on in another form. So it's essentially, why do we do it? We do it because it gives us pleasure. And then beyond that, I think there's this control factor to a certain degree, because if it's yours, you can do with it what you want. At work, no, you're not doing what you want. So it gives many people an avenue to relieve maybe some frustration that they feel, and it adds another dimension to life. Just like I would say people that, for example, like ballet, go to a lot of ballets, that adds a dimension to their life. They can talk about ballet, all the ballets and so on and what they saw. But collecting is just another form of pleasure seeking, a healthy form.
Very, very interesting. This gives me a lot of new perspective. Like, you're considering this just another hobby, right? Like, oh, I like listening to music. I listen to a lot of music. I go to live concerts. And this is something similar. So I watch football games and then I go and talk about sports to my friends. And this could be something similar. This is very interesting. I want to tell you a little story which happened last year. I think you will find this interesting as well. So one of my friends, Sangamitra, in India, there are lots of states, lot of cultures, and every culture has different things going on, which even like we as Indians are not aware. She invited me for a South Indian tradition they do. And what I found out is they go and collect dolls. Right? Like, so every year during this festival, they have a huge display of all the dolls they have collected. And this is passed on from generations, from mother to their daughter to their daughter. So like they had a huge collection and they also did themes, right? So it starts with like your daughter being born, right? Like, so first year you buy one, second year you buy two dolls and three. And like, this collection keeps on growing. So they did multiple themes, like be it animals, be it this thing, right? Like, so this was a very fascinating thing for me. And I lived here all my life. I did not know it until last year. And I saw that happening. And with collection, both the mother and daughter had so many stories to tell. And it just made me really happy to listen to them and learn there are stories behind all of these places. And they're like, hey, we went to Malaysia and we bought these. It's just wonderful. I'll ask her the name. I'll send a link to you. This is what I just wanted to share with you.
Because I think that is so wonderful, a mother-daughter bond through the common interest in the dolls. It is just expansive as to what could happen with that. So I'm so glad you told me, and I'll look forward to receiving the link. Thank you.
Yeah, so my next question is the art of getting tattooed, is the experience same as collecting, or experiences, story to be told, feeling joy, and then sharing? Do you think it's the same category?
That is a really good question. Yes, I would think that tattoos involve both experiences and collecting, because you can always show your tattoo. We just visited Vienna, and I think that they had an exhibit about tattoos. I think there might have even been a book about it. It had just left when we went there, but they still had a little poster up. Yes, tattoos are most interesting. And I remember way back in the late 1800s when an American man went to Japan and he had himself tattooed, because many of the Japanese were. When he came back, when he died and came back to the United States, his relatives didn't want to claim him because they thought it was so bizarre that he had tattoos. It must not have been prevalent in the United States as yet. But tattoos are obviously totally accepted today and can be so beautiful. The Recruit has a woman, the series on Netflix has a woman in it with a snake tattoo on her back, and it's fantastic. Maybe we should all be getting them.
Yeah, I don't have one. Do you have any tattoos?
No,
Okay.
no, I'm not in that age group.
I'm sure it's not an age thing. It's never too late, right? So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, right. If you interview me again, maybe I'll have one.
Yeah, maybe next year. So let's see. All right. So my next question is, how do you define healthy collecting and obsession? What you have said is the healthy side of it, but can it go wrong?
It can. It can. Well, there's a lot been written about collectors being obsessive compulsive. And actually, it is definitely the minority of collectors who are obsessive compulsive, who cannot essentially put it away. And many collectors are driven, but when they see what they want, what they think they have to have, they, at the same time, when they see it, they think about financial considerations, space considerations. They put it into a larger picture. An obsessive compulsive person can't make those reflections on how it would impact him or her and the family and the household. So that can become a real problem, obviously. The next level would be hoarding. And hoarders truly, in my mind, are very different from collectors because they collect things that are of little value. They simply can never say no. They affect not only their own well-being because they have to walk through paths in their household, but their family is impacted. And if a hoarder is in a family, the kids, for example, will not want to bring friends home because of the way the household looks. And the hoarder can be so obsessed that she just picks up anything, bring on the street, glass on the street, all of little to no value, but still filling the house with these found things, including newspapers. There's a story of two brothers who lived together in Harlem where their house was so crowded that a big stack of newspapers fell on one of the brothers and killed him. And he was in there for quite some time in the house with the other brother who was still alive for at least several weeks, if not longer. It's quite a famous story, and I cannot tell you the name, but I could look it up. These are horror stories with hoarders. But the important thing, and this is what I want to relate, is that 3% or less of people who are gathering objects are hoarders. Most people are healthy people. There are a few obsessive compulsive, a few depressed, and even a few who are collecting because of medical conditions. For example, people with Parkinson's disease can be on dopamine drugs that can predispose them to collecting, and they never did before. People who have had cranial surgery, who never collected previous to the surgery, sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes will start collecting afterwards in an unhealthy way. So the condition is most of the time healthy, but at times can get out of hand for various reasons. It's very sad when it's a medical condition, and if it's not recognized that that's the problem, that makes it a difficult situation for the person and the family.
Yeah, that does make sense. Thank you for sharing these stories. We get to see how the goods and the bads, but statistically the numbers are less than 3% of people are doing this, and most people are mindful about themselves, their family when they're collecting, because it could be an expensive habit. Just my assumption, I could be wrong. I think in India I have not seen as many collectors because just the general standard of living is quite low. Most of the people I've seen around have cash crunches. So it's hard for them to go and buy something which is probably not. But this is not the case everywhere. I have seen people collecting cassettes, CDs, gramophone, vinyls, and various other things. But I want to ask, what do you think about digital collectibles? When you first heard about it, were you as shocked as I was? Because in 2017, when I heard that people are spending thousands of dollars buying pictures of cats on as NFTs, I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. So this is my reaction. What was your reaction?
I wanted to look into it further. I did write a short paper on why people collect digital, and their motives are quite similar to collectors of physical objects. Beyond that, I think that I'm hoping that this is not the case, but it could be a fool's errand. It could be that people who are collecting NFTs are doing so because of the novelty, the newness, which stimulates a certain area in our brain and makes us happy. Any novelty, for example, if you and I go to a party and there's a particularly good-looking person of the opposite sex, looking at that person is kind of a novelty, especially if they're dressed up really beautifully. So that would catch our attention. Well, it's the same way with NFTs. It's not something that we had heard of before, and thereby it catches our attention. At first, it was in the news all the time. Now it's in the news because of, what is he called? Friedman?
Sam Bankman
Yeah.
Friedman,
Right. But that's about all we hear anymore.
Uh-huh.
It used to be we would hear, oh, NFT is up to so much, but the market has dropped considerably and people are probably less interested and more afraid, which might be justified. But I think you own some NFTs. Is that not right?
I own around 200 NFTs.
And I would like very much to hear
Yeah.
what your strategy is. Is your strategy to buy a lot and diversify and then hoping that one of them will hit pay dirt?
Yeah, so I'll give you my story and my thesis about NFTs. So for me, NFTs, I think three reasons why people buy NFTs, and not talking about financial reasons, right? Like number one is to be part of a community. Like, so I bought Cool Cats. This is like one of the NFTs I have, which is quite popular because a lot of people really liked cats in that community. They bought it for $50, $60, whatever. And we just got in and I wanted to experiment. And like I met these guys. They were the most wholesome bunch of people I found in Web3 because earlier to that, like most of my interaction was with developers and nerds who are like, hey, this is the tech and this and that. I'm not saying anything that's bad, right? Like, so, but like I saw a very different side of people who were very wholesome, very artsy, very creative, very fun loving kind of people. So community, place it in the same bucket as like, people buying baseball cards or supporting a football club, right? Like the community is there. Number two is status symbols. Oh, I can afford to buy a $10,000 monkey picture, a bored ape, so people just buy, right? Like, oh, I can buy a beeple, so people buy. And number three, which I think is something new I'm seeing, its utility. A lot of NFTs were launched with a promise like, hey, if you hold this NFT, you get access to a conference every 3 years. Gary Vee did that. Coachella came and said, if you own these NFTs, you have lifetime access to all the one of my friend who bought Disclosure's NFT. Disclosure is a DJ duo, I think, and they also gave access to lifetime. But what happened was like when this friend bought that NFT, they were throwing a party, and this guy just called up the DJ. He's like, "Hey, we are doing a party. You wanna come?" So that guy flew down and played at their event. So,
Oh my,
like,
yes.
the interaction between a creator and a fan completely changed in my head. Like earlier, I would just adore, I would pay, let's say, $30,000 ticket to like be somewhere near the stage. But like, this changes the dynamics between a fan and an artist, right? Like, so this is my idea of why people are collecting, apart from, oh, let's make money out of it. That's like one of the reasons. Yeah, like, do you have any comments on this? What do you think?
Would you summarize the three reasons again? Social, community, what was the other one?
So one is social status, one is community, and third is utility. Like if I own this NFT, do I get something in return?
And what did you call that?
Utility.
Utility, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Very, very interesting. But the most important to you was first the community, then the social status, and then the utility.
In no particular order.
Okay. All right. I've definitely read about that social interaction and community before, and the utility less so. But I think that you could be a poster boy for a column in Psychology Today.
Oh my God, that's that. You have no idea. I have done. So I've done my master's in psychology. I've studied clinical psychology, and I have done so much research on Psychologies Today and referred so much stuff from there. Like just hearing that coming from you means a lot. Maybe I will like, deep dive into it, take your help and see what can be done.
Okay, I love what you said.
Yeah.
But I would like to know why you felt compelled to buy 200
NFTs. Yeah. So my origin story of why I started collecting NFTs is basically I found it very dumb, first of all, in 2017. And then when I came back into the ecosystem, and then NFTs just died. Right, like there was CryptoKitties, they were the first most popular, and 2020 went crypto full time. I started seeing NFTs were being sold. Crypto punks were being sold for 3-4 ETH or $10,000. Again, my first instinct is this is stupid. But like, as a student of psychology and understanding human behavior, I was like, I need to figure out why are people spending this, because that could be an opportunity to just understand how behavioral economics works in a way. And then I went on and interviewed people who I wanted to understand what they're doing in NFTs, right? Like, so one person was Jeff, was building an game, Axie Infinity. So I interviewed him, understood like, what is their motivation. And then I met Matt, who was also very much into NFTs for last few years. I understood like, what they're doing. So I was like, let's get our hands dirty. If I don't try this, I won't get to know how it feels or what people are doing. So I went in. I did not have a lot of money, to be very honest. So I had to make sure whatever I am purchasing is worth. So I was thinking 100 times, because Indian salary and spending in US dollars, it's kind of tricky. So I went and I bought a few NFTs, which I personally thought like, hey, these make sense. And they turned out to be a very good investment within few months. So then, then you have the beginner's luck, right? Like, oh, I'm the smartest person in the world. Let's go. Let's go and buy more, right? Like, so I started, initially it was just like, let's gamble, let's try what it is like. And then like within the process, I started realizing, hey, like, I can meet people, I can understand their stories, I can collect art for the fun of it. So I started doing that because I was enjoying it. Like, so first 100 were probably like just gamble, fun, but like now I'm more conscious. And I think since then, I don't know, something in my brain changed. I started appreciating art more. I started appreciating culture more. I started understanding like, human beings and their value, how they value things, right? Like, so since then, obviously I started for money, but like, I think I find it fun. And then I just went back and saw like, oh, I have been collecting music. Like every concert I go, I collect the band and I keep it in my home because it's a memory. So I think like, I was just like, oh, this is like basic human nature. Even if it's online or offline, it's quite similar, right? It made me feel good and it made me feel connected with people who are part of the story. And out of the 200, only like 5-7 of them have any value, but they have paid off whatever I've invested. So I'm quite happy with what has happened. So this was like my collecting story. I don't collect that much because like the market is down. So whatever is going to happen, it will take a lot of time. So I don't have that kind of capital to, what do you say, to preserve, maybe because I need working capital for survival. So that's where that's where I am at. But like I think I have become a more accepting human being about art and whatnot, because earlier, before this, I never appreciated art. I would never go to a gallery and look at art. That was not me. But now I want to experience these things. I find novelty somewhere there. So this is my story.
This sounds like so much fun, really, what you've done. And you made back your original investment on the 5 to 7 that did well. So that's good. So you're not out any money.
No, I have made profit. So like I'm in profits.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so you've had all these experience and you've had ownership and it's turned out positively.
Yep.
What could be better?
Yep.
It's life. It's a good life.
It's a good life. It's a good life. Yeah. So I'm maximizing my life for happiness.
Right. That's good. I like that.
Yeah. I've seen you written multiple articles about NFTs. What is your take on it? How do you look at it? Apart from like, the price tag.
I think we do not know enough. I think that we are in the developmental stage, like baby steps right now. And I'm thinking that in not too long, government controls will change the playing field entirely. Bankman Fried, that is his name. The government will be acting pretty quickly here so that the common person can't get hurt. I think you are you're a poster boy. You're a good story, but probably not everybody has such a positive story. So it is on the government to protect its citizens, and that's what it will be doing, I'm sure. Which again, then the whole thing will have to be reevaluated as to how that plays into buying NFTs in the future. It will be a different ball game.
I get it, right? Like maybe we don't consider this as NFTs with like financial value. What SBF did was completely different. Like he took the investors' money and like, just gambled it away. I don't think a lot has to do with NFTs at all because he was in no businesses that. But what do you think about digital collectibles, right? Like, is that something you think is natural? Because just to give you an example, you might have seen people play Fortnite or Valorant or any computer games, mobile games, PUBG, or people are spending hundreds and thousands of dollars to buy game skins, which is not NFT or anything, right? Like this is just, hey, I want to show off in this virtual world. And people have been doing that. Even 10 years back, I was part of a technology forum and you could buy certain awards which like were pinned next to your name, or it used to make your name glitter or shine or bold, right? Like, so people have been paying for digital things. What is your take on it? Is that something you have observed while research, or maybe in your family or someone you know?
No one in my family invest. Well, actually, one person does invest. That's not exactly right, and evidently has done well. But I think and I don't think this person fits into the category that you are perhaps talking about, which has to do with aggrandizing oneself, getting attention through NFT or through digital.
Digital, yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, all collectors do this. All collectors want to be noticed, either subconsciously or consciously. I think it might start out subconscious, and then after getting into a collector group, you realize that it would be nice to be special in the collector group. So that increases what one has to buy. The digital would be the same thing. I always think that the hedge fund guys who have so much money, they compete for art, not on the beauty of the art necessarily or how well they like the art, but just because they're in competition with other very rich people and they want to show off. There can be no other reason, it would seem to me, to pay multi-millions of dollars for art that if you're on an island with your piece of art, you can't eat it, you can't drink it, you can't use it as a blanket. It has none of the primary functions that we need for life. But it does enrich life if you have all those primary needs fulfilled. If you have shelter, if you have running water, if you have money for the grocery store, then you have your primary needs filled, and then you can afford to get something beyond them. I thought it was interesting that you said maybe not many people in India have the resources to buy art, or to buy NFTs, but those that do, I suspect, do buy them.
I just want to ask about your collection. What do you collect? I think I should have asked this long before. What do you collect? Why do you collect? And tell us a little bit about you as a collector.
Okay, I'd be happy to. I collect something called Chinese export porcelain. I am in a room where I do not have a ready example to show you, but at the end, maybe after we close, I can put one up on the screen for you to show. But Chinese export porcelain is China, made in China and exported to the West. So thereby Chinese export porcelain. And my collection is from the 1500s to about 1800. I do not like pieces beyond 1800 generally. So it's early through the middle stages of export from China to the West. And what got me interested in this was a museum in San Francisco where I saw a mistake on Chinese porcelain. In other words, the Chinese porcelain had writing on it, but the writing was wrong. Essentially, an error on the part of the Chinese in interpreting an English direction, which could happen anywhere. So this kind of miscommunication happened throughout the trade between China and the West. And it has always fascinated me because we think today cultural miscommunication is, we don't understand why it takes place because we have so many options. Well, it took place way back when, but then they had an excuse because the travel time between China and, let's say, Holland or England was so long. It was at least a 2-year turnaround. Today we have the telephone, we have emails, we have Zoom. We still don't understand each other. So it's a continuing problem. And Chinese export porcelain, the mistakes on it just demonstrates this in such a gentle way to people that we humans, our brains were developed over hundreds of thousands of years. And although they are changing, that is true, we still carry a lot of the misconceptions of our ancestors. For example, this morning I was having coffee with someone, and she was saying that when she meets with a client, she tries to think about how they'll dress and so on. And so she likes to match it. Well, this dates back hundreds of thousands of years. People like people who look and act and talk like themselves. And if you ever want to sell anything, you just want to blend in with whomever you're trying to sell something to. So I'm just trying to explain that our brains have changed, but not as substantially as we might think. So we're still acting like people 400 years ago. We still value things. We still dress up our house to impress our friends and to suit our tastes, of course. But we are caught with this brain that is developing, but not as fast as I think a lot of tech people would like to think. Oh, and this brings up another thing. Artificial intelligence, they say it acts like the human brain. We know a little bit about the human brain works, and that's what I put in my book, what we do know, but there's 90% plus that we don't know. So, I mean, I think that is a poor advertisement for artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So how did I get interested in Chinese porcelain? Do we have time for that? So when I was in high school, I saw this movie called The Inn of Sixth Happiness with Ingrid Bergman. And it was tailored after a real incident of a British woman that went to China during the Sino-Japanese War, the second Sino-Japanese War, which was 35 to 47 or so. And how this woman persisted in helping Chinese children in China during that period, because many of them were orphans. So I was so impressed by that. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to be a doctor in China and I'm going to help all the Chinese children. That was a little ambitious. So when I graduated from medical school and after residency and fellowship, if I still wanted to do that, I really couldn't. Mao Zedong was definitely in power. I had a family of my own. I had a husband and a child. So I think that subconsciously that was all percolating in my brain. And I just gravitated toward Chinese export porcelain because then I could learn about China, go to China, interact with Chinese. And it fulfilled me in the way that I had hoped I would receive fulfillment when I was in high school. Now, talking about this, I think it's important to relate it to collectors. Any collector, most collectors will, if they look back and give themselves time, they look back in their subconscious and think about events in their life, they'll be able to pinpoint why they collect one thing or another. It could be a teacher they admired that collected this particular object like Japanese pottery, or it could even be a movie as it was for me, or it could be seeing something in a museum that just mesmerized them for whatever reason. We'd have to dig deeper even for that, but yes, I think we all have a reason that we collect what we do, whether it's fruit jars, baseball cards, records, mice and porcelain, whatever. And for you, I'd like to hear, have you dug down deeply yet?
No.
To try and figure out?
I do not think so. But I think what you said earlier, having control over things because life is so uncertain. And I think we like certainty no matter what we believe, right? Like it's a fun activity, I think. I have to go deep down and see what is it collect or where the need is coming from. But I think this just helps me reflect quite a lot. We have 1-2 more questions. Is that okay with you? I'll try to make it quick. Yeah. Fun questions. What's the 3 weirdest thing you have seen people collect?
The 3 what?
3 weirdest things you have seen people collect.
Weirdest. Oh, weirdest. Oh, I like that question. Dead animals. Stuffed animals. Many people consider that weird, but the people that collect stuffed animals don't think it's weird at all. And it's evidently on the rise in the United States, taxidermied animals. So I found that to be unusual. I wrote an article about it. There was an exhibit at a small museum in New York City. I went to the exhibit and I wrote about it.
I can't process it.
Another thing that is I would consider weird is people who collect bad art. It's art that's terrible. It's a new fad. So art that is just disgusting, they collect it. And there are now even museums of bad art, like maybe 5 throughout the world.
I would love to be part of this collection.
Oh, you think you have some things that will qualify?
No, I do not, but it sounds fun.
Right.
I can draw some things that would qualify.
The third thing I think I have to struggle for because nothing just comes to mind. But if we go back to taxidermy, in about the late 1800s, Mrs. Astor, who was a socialite in New York at the time, had a party, and one of the ladies that came to the party wore a taxidermy cat on her head, and her gown was made of calf fur, of white calf fur.
Wow.
So they had taken the fur off all these white cats and then made her gown. Now that's an example of how bizarre things can get.
Yeah. Guys,
we consider that a little inappropriate today.
And weird is subjective, right? Like, what's weird to me might not be weird to you. So yeah, it's just a subjective opinion,
Right.
guys. So yeah. Okay, one collections or a particular item you were in awe of when you saw, like, oh my God, oh, you have this. And maybe nothing related to what you collect, right? Like just something else completely.
That does happen to me. You're definitely on track there, where I get something called a Stendhal syndrome, where I almost have an out-of-body experience. Something is so beautiful. And believe it or not, I can't think of when that happened, but it happens to me once or twice a year. I guess I can remember maybe an instance when we were in Peru and we went to a Spanish-American art museum in a small town. And I saw some Spanish-American art there that I had not seen before. I'm calling it Spanish-American. It was done by Spaniards, but Jesuits and so on had influenced them. So that's why I'm calling it Spanish-American. But their art was gorgeous. And, there's this painting of Christ at the Last Supper with the guinea pig, which is a traditional dish in Peru. But the guinea pig is like this at the Last Supper, belly up for Christ and the apostles to eat. And that, I don't think I was in awe, but that did tickle my funny bone quite a bit.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes. So I'm sorry I can't come up with something better.
No issues.
I'll think about it.
Okay, but maybe if not in awe, but like, you found this collector or collection or an item to be super interesting.
Right. This is interesting to me, but will not be to everyone. 1 or 2 houses on the East Coast in the United States has a blue paint, just like you have. I'm very given to this background that you have. And it has like silver sparkles in it. And going into a house like that has a room with this deep blue wall, but with silver sparkles, I find it exciting. It makes me happy for some reason. And there will be a couple things here. One, to me, it's beautiful. And the other thing is it's such a novelty. You see it so rarely. And when we are done, if off the Zoom call, I will show you there's a room next door where I do have a blue room like you have, but no silver sparkles, which is so sad.
Yeah, maybe next time I'll see the silver sparkles as well. That could be a new addition.
I would like that.
Yeah. Awesome. So I think I just want to ask a little bit about your book. Where can we get it? Do you want to say anything which we might have missed out, which is there in the book, or you just want to talk about?
Well, thank you for asking. The book is visually rich. It has many illustrations, and so that makes it reader friendly. The second thing that makes it useful to any kind of collector is that each chapter has normally just a page or a page and a half devoted to hardcore neuropsychology. The rest of the chapter is examples which illustrate. So it's really easy for anyone, even if they think they're not going to be able to understand the neuropsychology, to get through the book. I talked with one girl who said that she read the book cover to cover and would skip the hardcore neuropsychology parts. But she got the gist because there were so many examples. So she didn't really even need to read the hardcore science. My goal in the book, in addition to bringing collectors' minds up to date, was to help collectors understand themselves. So everyone that reads the book will have not only a new appreciation of why they collect objects, but also, I think, a new insight into who they are. And you know, it seems to me that in life, what we're looking for is to understand ourselves, why we do all these things we do. And I believe that inside the head of a collector, Neuropsychological Forces at Play, my book will help people. And I am working on another book. It'll be probably 2 years, but it'll bring everything up to date from that book. So there are new things that are happening that are very exciting.
It's awesome.
So thank you for the interview.
Thank you for giving me your time, talking to me, and this was very insightful. Like, I feel I learned so much, and so will the listeners. And good to hear that, like, your book is a visual experience as well, and has a good mix of, oh, I don't understand psychology, and a reader like me can, and like all my listeners can also read. So go check out the book. Link is in the bio, guys. And thank you, Dr. Mueller, for giving me your time and being here.
Thank you, Dee. It was a really enjoyable experience.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.